So we are almost done with the cream step of our old age makeup. We just have our lips left. We have to do our jawline and then also a little bit on the neck. So as far as the jawline is concerned, you kind of have two options here. So we could just we could shade it normally, just kind of let it be what it is depending on how your jawline is. If you wanted to be like super, super sunken, the same way that we did this shading here, we could go in and we could kind of cut this off with shadow, so that way this is all just kind of gone and you look very, very gaunt. Or we can draw in, kind of like we did here, the idea of like sagging skin. So this is going to be sort of like where we're going to draw in jowls, and the way I like to think of that is if you're drawing in kind of like a scallop pattern. So it's a little tricky to do on yourself, so I might get obnoxiously bright as I look in like several mirrors while I do this, but basically we're probably gonna have to go in and shade a little bit more, but I feel like I usually start sort of like at the base of the ear, and I really hope that y'all can see this, and then you kind of go up onto your jaw and then kind of go down and then you go up. So it kind of just depends on, like, I guess how big you want the jowls to be. I feel like will give me like two of them, and then I kind of actually like connect it. Maybe I need that, might be better. Okay, so you can kind of see it as like a scalloped pattern, and again, this is really tricky to kind of do on yourself, but hopefully it can at least make a little bit of sense, and you can kind of see what I just did. It looks a little all over the place right now, obviously, because it's not like, because I'm really bright, so bright, but hopefully you can kind of see the way that it like curves up and everything, and this is going to help give the illusion that our skin is really kind of sagging. So it's sort of just this like, it's like a wavy scallopy line, I guess, is for lack of better words. We'll use that as our technical term, a wavy scallopy line, to kind of figure this out, and you can kind of just like make it disappear underneath the chin. And it is one of those things, this is not a technique that I recommend if you're going to be up close to people at all. I would just do like the standard shading or the sunken, but if you're going to be further away, you can definitely kind of play around with this a little bit. And then we usually need, I feel like, a little bit of shading like right like underneath all of this, because we're going to end up with some highlight too, but we'll come back to that. So let's try to blend this out a little bit. And then why I put my mirror away like I was done, we'll never know. But again, you want to shade these up, but then we also want to make sure that we maintain the shape. And by shade these up, I meant blend these up, but we want to make sure that we maintain the shape as well. So it kind of goes back into my ear shading, which is like another reason why I do really like to have all of this shaded, is that everything can kind of just like flow back into each other. And then kind of follow that around, and then now we kind of have to figure out, and we'll go in and we'll kind of get rid of that. Maybe I'll stop being so bright, we'll never know. And then I'll go in and I will add in my highlight. So I feel like this is where it gets a little bit confusing a lot of the times too, but basically you need it to be directly underneath, so it's sort of like inside the scallops, if that makes sense. And so again, this is a technique that I love to do on other people because you can see it a lot more easily than you can see it on yourself. So definitely, it's a great effect, but is it the easiest effect to do on yourself? Absolutely not. And then sometimes I feel like too, it helps to have just that a little bit of highlight, like where it indents. That really helps it too. So that's why it's like, I feel like these kind of don't follow the same rules as like the highlight has to go underneath it. I just feel like it looks a little better sometimes if there's like that little hint of highlight inside the little scallopy wave, as we go back to our very technical terminology that we have. So we've got that in there, and then now we can kind of blend this out, and remember our highlights blend away from our shadows, so I want to blend this down because I blended my shadows up. And I think especially, I don't know, I feel like usually right here I can get it to work really well. It's a little trickier on yourself when you're back, but at least it's, even when it gets that bright, you can still kind of see it, right? So maybe that is helpful after all, that it gets randomly bright like that, because I don't know how to control my own lighting. And then we can just kind of pull this down. And so the highlights like in this part aren't as intense as down here, but I feel like it does just kind of help it. But you can kind of see when I back away that really does look definitely pretty. I'll try to get some good like side photos and stuff of it at least, but that definitely helps it look like my jawline has changed a lot and definitely sagging a little bit compared to like when you look at this side where I have like a very pronounced like prominent jawline. This kind of helps it look a little bit saggier. And so now it's kind of like, well, how do I shade my neck now that I'm at this point? So as far as shading the neck goes, I think one, it's going to depend on how much of your costume is showing your neck, but usually, so whatever you would want to stand out, so usually like your collarbones, like that would be highlighted. Usually like this is going to be highlighted on you, so it's usually like the sides of it that we need to have a little bit of shading. And you also need to remember, if your whole neck is going to be exposed and your face looks really, really old, your neck needs to look old, potentially the back of your neck needs to be old, hands, which we're going to talk about as well. These are all things that you have to make sure that they're going to look consistent, because if just your face is like 85 but your neck is 20, it's going to look a little different and a little bit off. So just kind of make sure that you always keep that in mind. But a lot of times I think costume designers are wonderful and they will just cover the neck and you're wearing gloves or something like that, because it can take a long time to have to do these kinds of things. And so one thing you can do with the neck is you can kind of see, you can like follow this center part and you can kind of shade in where it indents if you want to, so we'll kind of do that. And again, not the most graceful angles to be working on yourself, but pretty much kind of like where it caves in is where you would want to shade it. And you can also like draw in your neck wrinkles too. So this area, great, we're gonna shade that, and it looks a little messy, but it'll even out eventually. And then I do like to have shading like on the sides of it too. And this is probably somewhere where like honestly if you're just using a sponge, that's probably going to be a little bit easier when you are trying to shade a larger area. And again, it's not always going to be the most graceful things in the world when you are applying this kind of makeup, but definitely it's important to not forget your neck. You don't want to be a floating head. That's something I will always say in all of my classes, because it's very true. You don't want to have like this wonderful age makeup and then you get to the neck and it basically just stops. You want to make sure that you are consistently old all the way through the makeup. Okay, so we're gonna stop with that and then we're gonna work on kind of blending this. So with these, I feel like you can kind of like blend them back a little bit, but these I try to really almost like blend out the whole thing, because I really like prefer when these are just like shadows and not anywhere near as harsh of a line as a lot of like the wrinkles on our face are. And also, so if your neck is really sensitive, or for whoever you're working on, if your neck is sensitive, this can be kind of a very like uncomfortable thing. So just make sure that you're being mindful of that and you're being really gentle, just like if you're working on somebody's eyes. This is an area that a lot of people are not used to having any makeup or anything applied to, so you just want to make sure that you're being sensitive and you're being aware of that, because you don't want to end up hurting somebody or making somebody uncomfortable. If you do ever have to do like a full age makeup on yourself or on someone else, it can take a long time, so you just want to make sure that you're being kind and kind of sensitive of that. So if we wanted to, instead of like this big kind of shadow, I could draw in some wrinkles. I don't know how well it's gonna work now because I already like shaded everything, but we'll try it and see what we can kind of create here. But you can do the same way we did like jowls on here. We can kind of do that on the neck. It's probably gonna look a little weird because I got all different kinds of shading going on now, but we'll try to like fake it a little bit. And so with the neck, I think it's one of those places that you can like really get away with like not necessarily not doing a ton, but I think you could like quickly shade it and people are gonna get the point, as long as it doesn't look like as smooth as my non-made up side of the face does. People are gonna understand that you're old, and they won't necessarily need you to like draw in as many intricate wrinkles and things as maybe I am doing currently. I think that'll still kind of work out okay. And so now we're going to throw in our highlights. I've pretty much just been working with the white, just because with me I don't know why I even tried to start with something that was more skin tone, because I know that I am very pale. So with this, we want to make sure that underneath all these wrinkles that we drew in, we've got a nice highlight, and then kind of on the sides of these like major ones, we've got that. And then I think maybe I'm having an allergic reaction to something. I don't know. We'll find out. If your skin ever starts getting randomly red, you should probably stop doing your makeup and make sure that you're not allergic. But I think it should end up fine. So we want to kind of go in, and now we're going to highlight any of the parts that kind of stick out, and that you have to make a lot of like unattractive, or like what we feel like a little bit weird, like you kind of have to like do weird things with your neck to kind of figure out maybe what these spots are. Like I feel like that's very off from what I should be highlighting. It's probably more like that would make more sense, yes. And that's one of those things too, because everybody is different. It's going to be a different process on everybody, but very generally speaking, this is the kind of stuff that you can do to kind of help shade out the neck. So this is probably getting a little bit closer into like actual skeleton and not just old person, but I think you kind of understand and kind of get the point here. And so we'll come under this like kind of jaw shadow, and I guess we'll just throw it on this side too. So this side's gonna look a little weird since we don't have all the makeup, but I think over here it'll end up looking kind of like nice and complete. And then we just have to go and blend this out. And again, our highlights are going to be blending down and the opposite way of the way we blended our shadows. Again, that one is really weird. That I think should actually be a shadow. But since it's just makeup, it'll come right back off. And that's one thing I think that's really important to remember, especially if this is like some of the first times you're ever doing age makeup, is that it gets really confusing. Even for somebody like me that has done it for years and years and years, I still get confused. And I think it's just one of those things that the more you do it, yes, the better at it you're gonna get, but unless you were doing this like every single day, it's probably gonna take you a second to kind of like regroup and figure it out every time you work on it. And so now I think we just have to go in and kind of like fix up and intensify some of these shadows, do the lips, powder everything, and then we can talk about some details and hands and hair.